Hey, this is William Tincup and Ryan Leary, and you are listening and watching the You Should Know podcast. We have Stacia Garr on from RedThread Research. You have to actually really, really concentrate when you say that. I've known Stacia for forever. We won't say years because I'd be embarrassed. And we've been in a lot of analyst rooms together. And I think she's been embarrassed for a lot of the things that I've said in those rooms, but that's
I'm
okay.
embarrassed for a
No,
lot of the
I
things you
just
said.
laughed. I've just laughed. No embarrassment.
So that's my job. That's my job at an analyst event is to be entertainment for everyone else.
I used to be terrified of what
What's
William was going to say as we were either on calls or next to each other anywhere. And I just got used to it that people actually don't care what he says. And
no,
they
not
just
at all.
take it to heart. And if I say it, I'm getting booted from the event.
You gotta live that life for a long time and understand that there's a shock value to it, but also people expect it. After a while, they expect that's what you're gonna say. You're gonna say whatever it is. Anyhow,
That's like me telling me I can pull off the salt and pepper hair look in a boardroom. It just ain't gonna happen.
fair enough. Well, you could get a cap or something like that.
I did try shaker hair at one point.
Bad idea.
Yeah,
Stacia, how are you doing? First of all, what we wanted to start with is, and you and I went back and forth on email and what we could talk about, because we could talk about anything, but we decided to kind of talk about megatrends, meaning some of the stuff you've seen in the first kind of 2 quarters and where you think things are going to go in the second half of the year, etc. So why don't we turn things over? First of all, introduce yourself and pronunciate your name in a way that you'd like for it to be pronunciated. And also tell us about what's going on at RedThread.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me.
Sure.
I'm Stacia Garr. Stacia, like Anastasia, no Anna. For those who need a
just send them an email; they'll get it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I'm co-founder of RedThread. We started RedThread about 6 years ago with really a pretty clear mission, which was to provide high quality, unbiased insights in our market and to help both practitioners as well as vendors understand kind of what's there, if you will, kind of cut through the hype, understand from a research and data perspective what they should be paying attention to, and then help, ideally accelerate ideas to the marketplace in an effort to make people's lives better. So that's what we do at the highest level.
And so would you analyst and advisory?
An analyst, yes. Research, yes. Advisory, yes. Consulting, not really. Which we get asked.
Good to know. Good to know.
A lot. I mean, on occasion we do consulting projects, but we are very much so a research house. That's where we get our energy from. And, if you're going to start something on your own and you're going to take that risk, you may as well do something you like to do.
100%.
Amen.
100%. And research, I've read a lot of what y'all put out, and y'all were very early into DEI before the market was really. Y'all were talking about DEI technologies. I remember looking at a lot of those reports going, they are so far ahead, they're killing it. Because you're looking at stuff that will eventually be important for other people and are important to other people. But I really like your research. I can't say that I read everything. I like pictures.
Well, you're not the only one. You're not the only one.
I do appreciate. I do appreciate the research.
This is one of those moments, William. Like, I read all your research. I don't really read it, so don't ask me about it. But if it had pictures, trust me, I looked at it.
I can do the executive I can do the executive summary and photos.
Yeah.
And then that's about it. That's what.
Well,
it's interesting how much our readership has both changed and not changed, right? So, I've been doing this. I was with with Burson for 8 years before this, and then with CEB now Gartner before that. And we would both have the visual and the presentations, and there was this idea that the visuals were always for the most senior audience because they're time compressed, blah blah blah. And now it's like it's kind of for everyone ish, but the reason I put an ish on there is I still have folks who come to me and who like literally will pull out the dog-eared thing that I wrote 10 years ago, y'all. I'm
100%.
not joking. 10
No.
years ago. And
Mhm.
they'll like show it to me and they're like, here's all the things. Or, I was talking to somebody, we were talking about this Talreos event that I was at.
Yeah.
And I had someone who was like, oh, when I left such and such company and we had access to what you'd written about people analytics or, with some other folks at Deloitte, like I printed everything you wrote for my next company because like, this is how I understand the world. And so you hear that stuff and that's so cool, but there are those people who read the whole thing and who
100%.
dog ear it and who highlight it and like, God bless them. I love
Yeah.
them. They make me feel whole. They make me
I'm
feel
a
100%.
mix. Yeah, I'm a mix there. I love images, but I sometimes have trouble deciphering what the actual analysis is behind. I know what my analysis would be, but I want yours.
Right.
So I'll go through the text and I'll read it, but I don't comprehend a lot of it. But every so often, I find something in there that's just explained at a first grade level that
Brian, when I was
makes
in school,
sense.
you'll like this because of your IBM experience, but I was taught by one of my professors who's an IBMer that the image, the graph, the pie,
Mhm.
whatever, has to stand on its own.
Right, exactly.
So it literally has to stand on its own without context.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what am I supposed to get out of this particular image? And if it doesn't, you failed in creating the image.
Yeah.
So, and that happens, good God, that happens everywhere. When you were at Burson,
Yeah.
what did you study? What was your area of expertise?
So at Burson, I led the talent management research.
Yeah.
And so that, included performance, that included talent strategy. Actually, there is where I started the DEI work. So I did a maturity model and framework. I want to say we got acquired in 2014.
Wow.
So that was 10 years ago, y'all. I can't believe
That seems so far away.
Yeah.
It was.
But it really
wasn't.
Yeah, no. And I mean, and a lot of that work was good foundation, if you will. So kind of the backstory on that DEIB tech stuff is, I'd done all that research and we'd published it 2014, 15, 16. And then actually I was out on maternity leave in part of 2017 when the whole Me Too thing started to really, kind of come to the fore. And I remember, I'm on mat leave with this teeny tiny baby, and yet my brain is still working. So you're just reading all this stuff, and I'm like, what are we going to do about this? What is, all that good stuff. And so
if it's happening in Hollywood, it's happening. Wall Street, we all know. It's happening everywhere in every company in every shape, size. It's
and we
happening
knew
everywhere.
that before, but it was just the willingness to talk about it and
100%.
the willingness to kind of hold more
accountability,
powerful folks to account. Yeah. And that I think was the switch. And so when people of all levels were able to say, actually, this is something that people finally want to do something about, that's when we started, at least in my head, I was like, okay, well, this is a huge opportunity for the tech, because whether it's, related to Me Too or it's related to DEIB more broadly, there is just a willingness to see what before we would look away from. And that's what tech can enable, particularly in moments of critical decision making. So, some of the stuff around, just highlighting, hey, on a silly, 2x2 or a 9-box grid, hey, this person has been rated as high potential and, high performance for 3 years, yet they have not been promoted when all these other people have. What's happening? Maybe there's a good reason for that, or maybe there's not. But tech can kind of, in an unbiased fashion, raise up our awareness in critical decision-making moments. And that's what a lot of that technology was about, was heightening awareness. And then ultimately people have to make different decisions.
Right. All right, let's do Megatrends. All right, what have you seen in the first part of the year, and what's exciting you, and things that are kind of going on, and then what do you see for the rest of the year? So take us into what you got.
So Megatrends is interesting. So twice a year we look at what's happening. We kind of lift up and look at what's happening. Like many others, we do it at the end of the year for sure. But then we also do it coming into kind of July and August. So this is a well-timed conversation from that perspective. When we were looking at the end of last year, I think a lot of the things that we saw then are continuing to hold, but they're different flavors, if you will. They've certainly evolved. So when we were looking at the end of the last year, there were 5 things that we saw as mega trends. And I should say that for us, we are not in the like, hey, we're going to talk about HR trends and, like employee experience is on its way down and this is on its way up. Like, that's not like, it's a false, right? Like, how odd is that? I don't know. Anyway, so what we talk about.
That's a chat GPT prompt right there.
It's a chat GPT prompt. I mean, literally, like, tell me what's out there and chat GPT will tell you. And, we'll talk about that as a mega trend. But I mean, the point being that there are more interesting, in my opinion, more interesting ways to look at the world.
100%.
And so the way that we tend to look at it is what is happening writ large in the world and how might that impact businesses and thus how might that impact HR? So the 5 things we were talking about, one was we said recession ?
Yeah.
And,
seriously.
So, and I'll go into each of these. Then second was geopolitical and social unrest.
Yep.
Third is technological advances, meaning basically Gen AI, but not solely, which I think is important to recognize. Power struggles. And then the last one was generational shifts.
Right.
And so across all of those, I think that they all still hold, which is good because they should if they are larger factors influencing our world.
Right. They shouldn't drop off the list that easily.
They should not drop off the list.
No,
if you chose your trends right, they shouldn't drop off. But I think the way that they're playing out is different than what we thought. So like, for instance, with the recession ? I mean, no one still knows what's happening, right? Like we thought, honestly, I was reasonably confident that come, looking into Q3, we were going to be like, yep, we're all going to be doing really a lot better than we were, whatever, last November, let's say. And what's interesting is I feel like coming into the beginning of the year, people were really positive, January, like, oh, this is going to be great, even partially into February. Yeah. And then it just felt like it stalled. And
the irony,
in my perspective, anyway,
is Wall Street's trading at the highest it's ever traded.
Yeah,
crossed over the 40,000 mark, right? But Main Street still doesn't feel that. So there's a disconnect between those two worlds, which there's always somewhat of a disconnect. But if Wall Street's trading at the highest level it is, why hasn't that filtered down in some substantive way? Which is crazy to me. And I can't help but think that this is all people are waiting for the election.
Yes.
And to make a decision on what we're doing. Like everyone's kind of holding back, going, I don't know, which way are we going? Which way are we going? What's going to happen? Which is weird because I also thought that about the midterms. But the midterms were such they weren't definitive. I guess I'll say it in a really nice way. I was expecting the midterms to be really definitive one way or another, and they were not. And so that didn't help. But I can't help but think that in your recession box, somewhere in that recession box is people's mentality around the stability of which path we're going to go.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, William. But what's really fascinating is that when you look at historically, so I'm a historian by education.
Nice.
When you look
like
at
history, or you got a specialization?
I've got 2 degrees in history before.
Me too. Me too.
These conversations hold true. Philosophy, humanities, history.
No, me too. I have art history and American Indian studies. So 2 histories, but in 2 very nuanced things. So what's yours?
My undergrad was history, where I focused on American history.
Cool.
Primarily.
Any era?
Yeah. So basically exploration through Civil War. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Very nice.
And I actually taught that. I taught exploration through Civil War at a community college for a number of years as well.
Bless you.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience. It was a good experience, but Yeah.
Well, at
Not for
community
you.
college, community college, you get two things. You get the people that really are excelling and they're kind of getting ahead, or you get the people that failed out and now they're coming home to kind of rebuild their grade
Yeah.
point average.
Or they were
Yeah.
forced to go to 13th grade by their parents. One or the other.
100%, man. You get the
Yeah.
partiers that went sorority, fraternity, they come back, shit, I got a 1.5, I got to do
Yeah, I
community
got to do
college.
something about that. Yeah.
Oh,
I was
God.
actually teaching outside of Washington D.C., which was really interesting
Yeah.
because I'd make them go see monuments that like they lived by, but they
Oh, yeah.
never went
Never
to.
saw.
You know?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that's true. Like the last time I've seen the Liberty Bell, and I'm in Philadelphia, I was probably in elementary school on a field trip.
Yeah.
I mean, the damn thing's
Wait,
30
Ryan, you
minutes
didn't
from me.
take your kids?
Dude,
All right, we're gonna edit this out. Back
Bad,
off, okay?
bad,
No,
bad
actually, we
parenting.
did. No. We did. They went down with school. We did go down with them, but the line was too long, so they saw it from the field.
Yeah. I mean, to
We
cuddle
went to
with
the
you.
Constitution Museum. Isn't that good?
Even my sons have seen the Alamo. Come on now, dude. Seriously.
Look, over COVID, we went to Williamsburg, and that
Yeah.
was
No, it's dope.
I loved it. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
talk
dope.
to my kids. It was not dope. It was the worst thing we made them do. Crying,
Really?
fussing. Oh
Really?
yeah. Why do we want to walk the cemetery? Why do we want to walk these battlefields? There's no battles. I'm like, right, but like 400 people died right here. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No interest.
No,
Zero
zero interest.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I've got I have a question of the
Yep.
four or five trends that you picked out going into the year.
Yep.
If you had to pick one of those, which is the one now that you're just kind of like, yeah, we hit the mark here and we really need to pay attention to this.
They hit the mark on all five.
Yeah, that's
mark.
hard, right? So I think if you where I was going, sorry, before, and then I'll come back to your question.
Mhm.
But when I went down this history,
Somehow we ended up in community college to monuments to
No,
Williamsburg
no,
to
we're
we'll come
good.
back.
the point I was trying to make was that the president has rarely influenced the economy, right? So if you look back
100%.
historically, right? So I agree with you, William, that people are holding their breath, but
Right.
why, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Other-
there's more work one could say there, but I
Yeah.
think it's just an interesting dichotomy.
Right.
And so what it ties into, I think, is that second trend, which is this geopolitical and social unrest.
Yes.
Right.
I think it was 84% of the world was voting this year, is set to vote or has voted this year on their government.
Right.
And that is just a major shift in terms of kind of the underlying, social structure, sense of stability, et cetera. So I think it really goes at that sense of stability, like this sense of a lack of stability. And that's part of the reason that it's
Right.
not filtering down and people are not as confident. And then you add inflation and high prices and, all that. But what we're seeing now, I'm sure y'all saw this, but like last week, Walmart and Target and Amazon
Yeah.
were saying that they're going to start reducing prices because people are basically just fed up, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think we're going to start to see some interesting shifts, but then obviously that affects all of our businesses, right? Because if the price reduction, yes, we're going to potentially see a compression of income, net income on organizations, and where are they going to,
Right.
are they going to be okay with those lowered percentages? Probably not. So they're going to be looking to efficiency, which is going to drive our people even more. Right. So there's all these things that are kind of cycling together, and then you add the third area, which is technology and AI and Gen AI and all that, and they're potentially accelerating efficiency, but there's complications
Yeah.
in
Sure.
that. So I think kind of those three to me, Ryan, I know that this is a very roundabout way of getting to your question, but I think those three really go
Combined.
together because the technology angle is also contributing to senses of instability.
Right.
If I'm worried about my job, and it's not just what has historically happened with new technologies, which are people who are maybe working at the lower level of skills in the grand skills hierarchy, but it's you, it's me, it's William, it's all of us who are producing knowledge work, and that is that is not something we have really ever had at this scale. in terms of a potential disruption to work. So I think those three things really, to me, are the big factors. And then, you add in power struggles, which is, I
Yep.
think, a natural outcome of that, because it's instability. So there's a
vacuum.
group of people who want more stability, and that's why we've seen the rise in unionization. That's why we've seen the rise in employee activism.
Yep.
And I think also why we've seen such a struggle between senior leaders who want people back in the office and people who are like, hey, when you had to trust me to work from home, you did. What's changed? Oh, wait.
Nothing.
What's changed is that you want to be in power and pull me back in. There, and I'll say that the thing that has just been honestly like a head fake for me is that that leaders have been saying, we want you back in the office for greater productivity and efficiency, right?
Soft skills. Yeah.
Right. But the thing is when people were working from home, we saw the greatest boom in productivity that we've seen in a decade.
Yep.
Right. And so it's literally like double speak, George Orwell, double speak.
100%.
And I have no problem with people going back to the office, right? Like, I think that there's all sorts of benefits to being in the office, but efficiency is not one of them.
No.
Who goes to the office to be efficient?
Well, you're in the Bay Area, and just pick a place that you'd have to drive to. That's probably a 40-minute drive or an hour drive, and that's 2 hours of your life that you're probably going to learn Spanish. Never. So you're going to waste. I used to tell myself.
Listen to the podcast.
We're listening to this podcast. Exactly, Ryan.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's like,
listenership will skyrocket.
I'm going to be productive, and no, you're not.
No,
it's just
you're
a waste of
not.
your life. It sucks life out of you. I wanted to ask you a question, because one of my fears of RTO is because you'll have hybrid, you'll have some flexibility, you'll have people that are there 5 days a week or whatever. Do you see, or do you fear kind of a second-class citizenry between those that are in the office and those that aren't?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'm
think,
looking like internal mobility and promotions and stuff like that. Like, the people that are in the office are going to get the first cuts at that stuff.
Yeah, and that was something that we were talking about as soon as people started talking about RTO and all the rest. I think that some of the ways I've seen some organizations trying to address this is in making some of the requirements on who has to be back in the office by job type or type of work being done. And so in theory, if all the X type of people have to be in the office, then the promotions should potentially be more equally or appropriately distributed. But I think it's really I don't know that that's really going to work. I mean, honestly, because there's always exceptions, right? And the other part of this is it goes back to a fundamental, I think it goes back to the stability question, right? Like, after COVID and with, everything that's going to happen since with the Great Resignation, all the rest of that, I think people are grasping for a sense of normality. And to treat people equitably who are in the office versus not, or to understand if people are working towards their goals and etc. without seeing them, means you actually still have to change the way you work. You have to have different ways of setting goals, of assessing people, of giving feedback, etc. And I think that just the zeitgeist of right now is a grasp towards stability and what was, and telling people you're going to have to do something different is just, or continue doing something different that was uncomfortable, is not what they're going to do. We have seen in the data, which I would not have anticipated this, but so we've been running these surveys. We started RedThread in 2018. We ran kind of our first holistic survey in 2019, thankfully right before the pandemic. So we've got a starting point. And what we saw was on things like my manager supports me being autonomous, my manager respects me, all that stuff. We saw this massive spike in 2020. And, at the time I was thinking, okay, this is kind of odd, but not sure what was happening under there. But then what happened is in 21, it went down a little bit. 22 it went down more, and 23 we are below 2019 levels.
Yeah.
So it is just this incredible. We were able to do this. We were able to help people feel supported and like they could perform and like they had access to the resources they needed, etc.
How much
But
do you
now,
attribute that to? Sorry to interrupt, Stacia.
yeah, no.
How much do you attribute that to the over communication that was happening during the early parts of the pandemic? Like,
And then it
we were
fell
all
off.
on Zoom. We were all on Zoom. HR, everybody was over communicating. Like, let's jump on a quick call.
I'm
Let's
going
talk.
to stop you, William.
Yes.
Were we over communicating or were we actually finally communicating?
I'm going to say finally communicating. Yes, that is absolutely correct.
I think so. Finally communicating, and then it got old, and
For
people
whom,
wanted to
though?
For
go
the
back.
managers, for the
It got
managers,
For
the
the
annoying.
leaders.
manager.
It
Back
got
to power
annoying.
struggle. For
It
those
never.
who were in charge, they
Yes.
got, I think in many ways, they got tired of the level of communication that was
Yes.
required
Yes.
Right.
and to actually communicate.
Yep.
And they have
They
been
pulled back.
pulling it back.
Yeah.
And so I
No.
don't, I
100%.
think that everyone's like, oh, well, why are people burned out? Why do we have lower well-being? Why do we have this disengagement? I think it's because
Yeah.
people saw there was a better way and that their organizations actually could do it.
Yeah.
And
They
now
could do it, and they chose, and they're
They can
choosing.
do it.
and they have chosen not to anymore.
Yes.
In the age of efficiency, or in the name of
Do you-
efficiency. And I mean, I went to business school. I'm a good capitalist. I get it. But I just think that people saw a better way, and I think there
Yeah.
was a better way. Not
Yeah.
that the pandemic. I mean, look.
No, agreed.
But from a communication, from a support perspective, I think that we saw, at least that's what my data show, is that we saw that people were more satisfied in these ways, and then now they are not, and yet we seem to be confounded as to why. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
It's generations.
I've
generations.
always-
and that's
I-
why, right? It goes to generations, which was
Right.
the final one, and it's
Right.
like,
Generation.
Yeah.
man, come
I've
on.
always looked at it as we were thrust into this situation. Organizations they didn't have a choice, so they had to make it work. In their
Yep.
minds, it was always temporary. This is a solution for now. When this passes,
That's a
we
good
will go
point.
back. And so the employees
Go back to what didn't work in 19.
Exactly. Yeah. So the employees, they grew accustomed to it. They realized that they actually have families. And look, I can take care of my child while
Yeah.
I'm working, and I can do this and I can do that. Organizations still thought this was a temporary solution. And now
so
they're bringing that
Brian, you're
back.
ascribing, you're anthropomorphizing organizations.
Ooh, that's
Organizations are
fancy
leaders.
word.
That's
Yeah.
fancy.
That is a fancy
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
That's a fancy word.
On occasion, you got to pull those out.
We got to
Yeah.
chat GPT the
Zeitgeist.
definition.
Yeah.
So you are giving
I need you
human-like
to lower your
characteristics
language
to
level.
a thing that does not have it. So an organization itself is not leaders.
Mhm.
Leaders. Let's be very clear about who we're
Very.
talking about.
Yeah.
Leaders
Leaders.
thought they would go back.
Yes,
100%.
leaders.
Right?
Yes.
Because I think it's really important to be clear on who is driving what here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because, when I've been talking to heads of HR, what they tell me is this is being driven from the C-suite.
Oh,
Right.
100%.
Yeah. The
This
leaders
is
at the
not-
highest level. Yeah.
This is not HR. This is not even the head of HR saying
Uh-oh.
this needs to happen. And so, this is, I think, and normally I'm not like quite, well, with our writing, I'm very picky about this.
Yes.
But the reason is if we don't know who's driving what, how are
Yeah.
we going to influence them? And so
Right.
this is, what are leaders influenced by? They're influenced by numbers that impact the bottom line or the top line. But and so this is part of the reason that I have spent so much of my life and time and effort on people analytics is because if we have met data and measures, at least that gets us towards making convincing arguments about what impacts what in an organization. And to be clear, numbers don't really convince anybody. They just reinforce biases very
Right.
often.
Right.
But numbers combined with really compelling stories do convince people.
Yes.
And but just stories don't. And
So
so we have to, I think, be clear about who is making decisions, what are the factors that will influence them, and how might we, particularly within HR, influence those leaders to things that are better for people and better for organizations.
See, I'm so jaded, Stacia, that I think that really what this came down to is, or comes down to, is this cut into leaders' golf time. So here's how jaded I am. I think they I think they communicated appropriately, as they always should have, but it was too much work.
It's exhausting.
And so that was cutting into whatever hobbies they might have. I'm going to just lean heavily into golf and say, you know what? All this communication stuff, it's not really necessary. Give them the tools and resources to be successful. They don't need the communication, and I can go play golf.
So would you say it's kind of like a CEO of a 50,000 person enterprise now having to work as if they're the CEO of a 100-person company and communicate individually?
They're not playing golf 2 days a week.
Right.
They can't get both jobs done.
I'm a little more charitable.
Charitable.
We knew you would be.
I know.
Somebody's got to bring me back
out there just to make us reel them back.
You can just say, "Look, William, you're full of shit." You can say that.
I don't have to. You did, Ryan.
Golf memberships are down.
I was feeling the vibe.
Yeah, but I think because the communication, just sticking on communication, there's lots of other things. But
right.
I think because it's soft, it's hard to measure, right? It's hard to measure what's the impact of this. Whereas, and also, honestly, as a senior leader, it's in some ways less fun, right? Like deciding to go buy a company or go in the strategic direction or drive sales. Like, that has all the exciting things that you're taught in business school that you should really be doing as a senior leader. Spending a lot of time communicating and
caring.
Building and caring. No, I mean, it's
having empathy, caring.
I think that's that those are things that are hard to do and hard to feel satisfied by. And I think that makes it hard. The other thing I think is really interesting, and this is going to kind of bleed over into this generational topic, is I think we are coming. I think we are about to see a major leadership change, right? So we had a whole bunch and generationally, I will put my standard caveat. I do not believe that generations have individual characteristics. They're just groups of people who are born between certain years.
100%.
But they're the baby boomers who have historically had one model of leadership, they've had similar traits of leadership, are moving off. They have been, they will continue. But what's interesting is just from a demographics perspective, Gen X was a lot smaller, right? Yep. And so you almost have this pullover, if you will, of millennials who are, roughly early 40s to, whatever, early 30s who are starting to come into leadership. And they have, I think, a different set of values, broadly speaking. They were raised in different types of families. Family structure is one of the few things I think actually holds up under the generational lens. But I think we're about to see a pretty major shift in leadership, and that this historical approach is probably in its ending days. And so that gives me hope, right back to your cynicism.
But I'm going to give you more cynicism on top of that. I've said for years that when women are in control, they're going to make not the same mistakes, but they will make equal mistakes as men did historically. So they might not, it might not be sexual harassment as a category of mistakes. They're going to make mistakes.
Oh yeah, so and I'm not talking about women here. I'm talking about just
but the generation that comes next, it's going to be different mistakes, but they're going to make a whole shitload of mistakes.
Of course.
To be human is to make a mistake.
Yeah. True.
That's what we do.
That's what we do. But see, that gets to what mistakes are they going to make?
Mhm.
what is that? What's the I don't know, what's the rainbow of mistakes that they're going to make? Yeah, it might be different than X or than boomers, but they're still going to make mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But they'll
But I
be
think
modern
I think they
mistakes.
will be. I don't think they will be the same mistakes of caring and empathy in the same
Good
way.
point. Good point.
And I
No, I
think
agree
that
with that.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
seeing is potentially
That's fair.
different. You know,
That's fair.
I know we're getting
Good
close on
correct.
time, but I just want to comment on that generational one because I think it's relevant here. You know, we for the first time this year are crossing over having more Gen Zers in the workforce than baby boomers, and
Wow.
that is a major, it is a major shift.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I think is really interesting has been the rise of all these terrible TikTok names of quiet quitting or
Yeah.
whatever. And people like to say, oh well, that's just the younger generation not working hard enough. That's what they always say.
No.
But what I think is interesting is at the same time that we have that, when you look at studies of how this, people who were, let's call it, 28 and younger, feel about retirement compared to people who are now older felt about retirement at that same age, they are far less confident that they will have enough money to retire, which means
Right.
that from an economic perspective,
Right.
these folks are feeling, I am going to work forever.
Yeah.
I'm going to work my entire life. Like,
Which is
I'm
a
not
great
going to
thing.
retire and like go, tootle around my RV
Right.
when I'm 65.
Right.
If that is the case,
They
it
could
is economically smarter not to kill yourself at
Yeah.
25.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
It
There's no
just
need to,
it is an economically
Your retirement's in
sensible
the front
approach.
end.
there's no need.
Well,
It's
no,
not a,
I wouldn't
it's
say
not
your
a
retirement's
sprint.
in the front end, but it's a
It's a
marathon,
race.
not a sprint,
That's right.
because you
That's
are
right.
never
Right.
going to end.
That's right.
Yeah. And with
Ryan.
healthcare getting better, medical care, you're living a lot longer.
Right. And so
All
you're
right.
going to work a lot longer. And so that is why I think that we need to be aware of these shifts and these megatrends and changes, because it is changing the nature of work itself.
Drops mic, walks off stage. Stacia Garr, RedThread Research. Please go to their website, sign up for their newsletter, and
Join
follow
the
her.
membership.
Join the membership. Come on. Good point. Join the membership now. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yes.
We absolutely appreciate your brilliance, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.